So, Galactica 1980. This was an odd experience for me because, I definitely agree with everyone out there. This is not worthy of being a follow-up to the original Battlestar Galactica series. It's way too different, and it was just a way of trying to get the audience back and all that stuff. But here's the thing. If you look at this on its own, all of a sudden, the formula for this is something that you've seen before. Because we've all definitely seen at least some bit of media, where people come from another planet and then they have to work on blending in with the inhabitants of the planet that look exactly like them but behave a little bit differently, maybe have different technology, and just stuff like that. Once we get to what this series really ended up becoming for the vast majority of its episodes, I'll discuss the bookends later. It felt like something that I'd seen before a decent amount of times. I can't think of the specific example right now because I'm regurgitating a generic plot that has been done over and over, And also the feel of this. Yes, this is rather dated, and it's ridiculously simple, but in a way that kind of added to not so much the charm, but my likability of this. Now keep in mind, I am not saying, oh my god, this is not bad, this is good. No, 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 no. This is meh. This is pure meh. I just like it better than the crowd does. It's as simple as that. But in a way, I do like this dated feel, There is a charm to that feel, not the show itself, if you ask me, yeah. And I felt like that they were pretty creative with little bits that they were trying to do, having Apollo's son, originally Boxy, now Troy, and his buddy trying to evade cops, getting the ability to befriend somebody in the local area who happens to be not totally influential but is up on the know on a lot of things and helps everyone blend in. Little humorous things where people from the other planet behave differently, mainly those kids, and they just don't know it. Having that Cylon crash in the middle of a field, and then you've got the UFO idea going along, even though that did seem kind of cheesy. I admire them for at least trying with this, though it's a bummer that they couldn't do what they originally wanted to do, because the bits that they were doing after those first 3 episodes, which formed the first story arc of the show, what they started doing after that was, in essence, the 3rd iteration of what the show was going to be. Because originally, you were going to have Richard Hatch return as Apollo, whoever played Baltar coming back, and that time travel would be an element of the show, but either Richard Hatch or the Baltar guy backed out of the project, and that made them retool it. So then you had the 3-part opener to this, which I thought was actually really nice. I was gripped for these protagonists while I was watching it, but then once that was shown to the studio's executives, they greenlit the show, but were like, we need to reduce the budget even further, which is why that American Revolution idea discussed at the end of the pilot didn't really come to fruition, even though they did sort of revisit that story in a later episode. I think it was the 6th or the 7th one. Yeah. I do like the fact, though, that they did at least try to go back and take care of that, because back then, people minded continuity errors less than they do now. They minded them, but back then we were just more accustomed to episodic stuff rather than continuity-based stuff. Now it's the exact opposite. Episodic stuff seems much more boring to us. You know? But that original idea that involved the actual cast of the show, it had potential, though it would have been a little, I guess, too visual. You know, just trying to do completely different time periods in history, and yeah, that definitely would have required a crazy increased budget. Not so much for the special effects department, but the costume department. Because at least in Star Trek, the original series, they didn't have the craziest amount of backgrounds that they were doing there, and the costumes that people wore, not that much to them. Yeah. Well, this show, it definitely would have really upped on that budget angle if they had done that. And then the last episode, The Return of Starbuck, aka Battlestar Galactica's version of Robinson Crusoe. That was a touching last episode. I really did enjoy it. What would they have done if they continued with this show? I don't know, but unfortunately, like with the original one, it seemed like that there wasn't the greatest overreaching idea for the main story arc, even though you had basics laid out there. It just, what happened is what happened, and this ends up getting cancelled too, although this was much more justifiable because, again, this isn't a sequel, this is a show that takes the idea of another show, tweaks it, and then runs with it in its own way. Yeah. And also, one other thing about the last episode that I forgot, I'm pretty sure that the young genius kid that is being featured in there, the one that Adama is telling the story of the episode 2, is the same genius kid thing that is present in the first 3 episodes. But he's being portrayed entirely differently. Now, granted, some people go, well, Leonard Nimoy played Spock differently in The Cage versus the rest of the stuff. But as somebody who watched The Cage first, I didn't notice that much different, honestly. There were similarities and there were differences. Yeah, but this, on the other hand, it's totally different. The kid in the first 3 episodes was a jerk. Kid in the last episode, you feel for him, regardless if he really is Starbucks' son or not. Not that much else to mention, honestly. Alright, so if you actually sat through this, thank you. See you in the next bit.